Hey everybody, welcome to Jason Explains Things. I have another awesome Toyota 4Runner video for you today. I am confident that I have found the best bang for your buck suspension upgrade available for the Toyota 4Runner, which is the Eibach Stage 2 Pro Truck Lift from Eibach. My wife and I have been daily driving and off-roading with this new setup for about 2 months, and it is a dramatic improvement all around. First, on-road handling, it's a little less floaty and a little more precise while not being harsh. Obviously, we've done a little bit of a lift, which adds more clearance, and the added articulation is also noticeable. Now, I would not recommend this setup if you're gonna do a bunch of high-speed desert running or take your 4Runner off any sweet jumps. But for my type of off-roading, which is, going maybe 20, 25, 30 miles an hour on primitive roads and crawling over rocks, overlanding, that kind of thing, it is fantastic. Now, before we jump into the install, I also want to say I am not sponsored by Eibach. Heck, I paid full price for this. I didn't even get a discount. But I like this setup so much that I'm considering it for my new Tacoma as well. So with all that said, let's jump back in time, back to the shop, and show you everything you're going to need to know about how to make your 4Runner look this cool. Tail of the tape. Before we start taking things apart, let's quickly measure what our stock ride height is at its current state. So we're gonna be measuring from the center of the wheel to the fender in the front and back. I'll call that 19 1/4, 21. So we're gonna want to raise the front by 1.75 inches at least when everything is said and done. You're about to get a complete step-by-step install, but first let's do a brief overview of this US-made suspension system and why I chose it. For all the info, check the description. The Eibach Pro Truck Stage 2 kit comes with front coilovers that are fully assembled and ready to install. They're preset at the factory to level your 4Runner with the rear. I did have to adjust them, but not by much, which is covered after the install. Ride height is fully adjustable because of the threaded shock body, all the way up to 3.5 inches, but Eibach recommends going no higher than 2.5. The new coilovers are rated to support an additional 200 pounds of weight, which is awesome in my case because of the added CBI winch bumper and Warn winch that combined weigh around 150 pounds. For the rear, you get new shocks and springs. The heavy-duty springs will raise your rear ride height by 1 inch and also accommodate an increased load of 200 pounds. Both front and rear dampeners are specifically tuned for each vehicle, have a strong steel body with zinc coating to prevent corrosion, and anodized billet aluminum mounting points such as the coilover top mount, spring perch, and shock base front and rear. Shock bodies measure 2.5 inch diameter in the front and 2 inch in the rear. Last big selling point is that Eibach claims this system is designed to work with stock upper control arms. I was very skeptical of this. For the final results after alignment, you'll have to stay till the end. Let the install shenanigans begin. All right, guys, we just finished the passenger side. Now we're gonna show you everything in depth on the driver's side. And we learned a couple things to make this easier for you. First thing is you want to disconnect your sway bar and tie it out of the way. And that's gonna make taking the coilover out much easier. And also, if it's in the way, as you're loosening things, it can get close to different parts, including your rotor, CV boot, brake lines, all that stuff. So it over there, it's not gonna be a pain in your butt like it was for us until we figure that out. So you're welcome. Okay, keep your handy dandy printed out instructions, and I'll have a link to a PDF in case you don't have that. And for tools, we have deep metric, regular metric sockets, ratcheting wrenches. I highly recommend ratcheting wrenches. It makes several parts of this infinitely easier. And then I have an impact and then a big impact to cheat a little bit. And then also, they show this cool technique of using 2 hammers to knock things out. We'll show you that. And then we have a torque wrench and a regular wrench, pliers, and a couple other odds and ends. And that is that. Let's get this old sucker out of here. To start, we got a 12mm and a 10mm bolt to loosen up our brake and ABS lines. And a cheat sheet, just put your bolt back in place so you don't lose it. Time to remove the tie rod end from the knuckle. Remove the cotter pin. FYI, you'll want to install a new one later. Never reuse old cotter pins. Next, remove the 19mm nut.
You
Get out of there, you 19mm son of a gun! This was hard on the passenger side and ridiculous on the driver's side. I tried WD-40, the two-hammer trick, and the sacrificial nut trick, which has worked for me countless times, but no dice this time. Tried everything again while supporting the lower arm at different heights with a floor jack, even resorted to fire. Bummer. Long story short, I ran to the auto parts store for some Freol penetrating oil and a tie rod end removal tool. The specialty tool got it out in a matter of seconds. Yes! Oh my gosh. For the remainder of the disassembly, keep the lower arm supported with a floor jack. You can remove the remaining fasteners in different orders. I decided to remove the 3 14mm nuts from the coilover top hat, which is made easy with ratcheting wrenches. If you guys are subscribers, you've probably seen my buddy Chris and his Chevy Colorado ZR2. Well, we just did this like a couple months ago on his truck, and there's like no room at all to work on the top of the shock. So everybody tease him in the comments about how Chevys are silly, how they're designed, and how Toyotas are better. He'll like it. Then I removed the 19mm bolt holding in the base of the coilover. The time has come to disconnect the knuckle from the upper control arm. To do that, you're going to first loosen this castle nut with a 19mm socket. Then you're going to tap on this with a hammer, or the two-hammer method as you saw earlier, so that you can then disconnect the upper arm from the knuckle, and then you can get enough droop to get your coilover out. I have this strap here. This is because I'm working alone, and you don't want, even though we have the lower arm supported so this won't drop to the ground or anything like that, you still want to be able to not have your knuckle move around too much one way or the other because it can damage your CV joint. There it goes. Let this droop a little bit more, everybody. There, push down and, oh, there we go. Just had to go down for just a second. There we go. Nice. All right, fun little sidebar. I thought it'd be cool to compare our OEM TRD off-road front coilover to our new Eibach. So, did some measuring of these guys, and they are actually quite a bit different. First off, this is a 2-inch shock body, and our new one is a 2.5. And this is actually something I found out about in a video from a guy named Tinker's Adventure, which I'll link to his channel. His videos are fantastic, doing a bunch of technical explanations of how these Toyota suspensions work. But what he said in his video that I learned and just checked on this, and it turns out to be true, is many shocks that you get, like the Bilstein 5100s and also this Eibach kit, is actually, you could call it long travel, even though it's not advertised as such, because this is indeed, I would say, about ½ an inch longer, which ends up being quite a bit more suspension travel. Only difference with putting this guy in is it doesn't have those, it doesn't have the nuts at the top, it actually has bolts instead. So we'll have to take these out, we'll put it in and tighten them up. And to show what part is the front is the part with the logo on it. How nice of them for that. There we go. It's a little harder to put this one in than, oh, actually not really. This one is actually a smidge longer, so. Thread in the 3 new 17mm bolts with lock washers into the top hat. FYI, I'm going to come back and torque everything to spec a little later. Install the lower shock bolt, washer, and nut with thread locker. Time for a pro tip. I'm going to decide to make this easier on future Jason and apply a little bit of anti-seize to the mating surface here on the ball joint, the upper ball joint, and also on that gosh darn tie rod. With a little bit of anti-seize on all the mating surfaces, I reattach the upper ball joint and tie rod end. Reattach your brake and ABS line brackets. Assembly is almost done, but we do need to torque everything to spec. Torque the top hat bolts to 35 foot-pounds. Torque the bottom shock bolt to 70 foot-pounds. The upper ball joint castle nut gets torqued to 82 foot-pounds, and don't forget the new cotter pin. Torque the tie rod end castle nut to 67 foot-pounds, and that also gets a new cotter pin. Ladies and gentlemen, we are almost done with the front suspension. Last thing to do, and I'm gonna get Chris's help to do this, is we're gonna attach the sway bar back in place on both sides. We need to attach our sway bar brackets right here. Those are 30 foot-pounds, and our sway bar end link that goes in right there is 52 foot-pounds. Install your skid plate, torquing those 4 bolts to 30 foot-pounds, and you're done. Oh yeah, your wheels. Also, put your wheels back on. Hey guys, we're back. Doing the back. Okay, anyway, so the back is gonna be much easier than the front was. So we're gonna lift the back up, take the wheels off, then we're gonna take the shocks off on both sides, and then we're gonna be using the buddy system and another floor jack to articulate the rear axle one way and then the other, so that way you can really easily remove the springs and put the other springs in, and then put the new shocks on, and Bob's your uncle. Right? Okay, cool. To be able to articulate the rear axle enough, I disconnected the sway bar end links on both sides. To keep the bushings and washers organized, I just left them on the link itself with the nut secured. Time to remove the first rear shock, and you can do either side first. Now, the instructions didn't call for this, but I recommend slightly supporting the side you're working on with a floor jack to prevent the axle from dropping suddenly. Start by removing the 17mm nut from the top of the shock. Here's a tip how to do that. What I'm doing here is holding the shock body with a strap wrench, and then I can take the top off. You can now let the side hang and remove the 17mm bottom shock bolt. The shock may need a little bit of persuasion to remove. Simple as that. Repeat on the other side. Hey, this plan actually works out perfectly because now that the jack is already in the right spot, we can start to lift the rear axle from this side and articulate it the other way so we can take the spring out on the passenger side. Before replacing the first spring, clean up the rubber isolator cone and mounting surfaces to prevent any noises or paint being worn away by debris. All right, let's take our new Eibach spring, our rubber isolator, and then we want to install this so that we have the end of the coil here about a pinky width from this groove right there. So really close to it, but not touching. Otherwise you're gonna get squeaks, squeak, squeak. Well, it's easier to get the old one out than the new one in. All right, might have to push down on this. Woo! All right, cool. Now, lift up on the side with the new spring in place to replace the spring on the opposite side. Having 2 people work in tandem makes this go really quickly. FYI, we'll finalize the gap between the coil end and the lower spring perch once both springs are in. It's time for our new shocks. These boots do not come installed, and they're kind of a pain to put in. Cut to some footage. Hopefully it's funny. These here dust boots are tight squeeze. Yeah, let's go around. Oh, it's like giving birth. Get that baby's head out. It's a shock. Whoa, and the baby's born. Wah, wah. Briefly, I wanted to show you the bushings and washers. So this is the part that's gonna be on the bottom, and this is the part on the top. Just like that, and then you have a nylon lock nut. I'm working on this top nut. This design, I gotta say, pretty cool. I like it more than stock. So we have 2 little slots right here so we can hold the body of the shock with a 18mm wrench, and we can tighten down the top nut with a 19. And I could not find a torque spec for this anywhere. But for now, we're just going to tighten this down so that these rubber bushings bulge out a little bit. With the top of the shock secure, raise the axle on the side you're working on to slide the base of the shock onto its mount. The anti-seize on here for the future. Now we can tap this into place. Now we're gonna put this bolt in place now, but we will not torque this until the vehicle is back on the ground. The buddy system is awesome here as well. While one person raises up the axle, the other can check and finalize the placement of the spring. With both shocks installed, reconnect your sway bar links, tightening till the rubber bushings bulge slightly. Lift! Present yourself! Okay! 72 foot-pounds. Haha! Hey! complete! Yay, this is the thumbnail right now.
That's a great, yep.
Well guys, the install was about 4 days ago, so we've had a chance to drive the vehicle, test everything out, and so far so good. Everything has had a chance now to settle, and our numbers did change from right after to now. So let's go over what our measurements all are, and then we can adjust our front. So in the back, we are sitting at 23 inches, and the front is where things get interesting a little bit and where we're definitely gonna be doing some adjusting. So on the front driver's side, we are sitting at 22.5, and on the front passenger side, we're sitting at 22 3/4, maybe even a tiny bit more. The reason for that, and Toyota guys know all about this, and I did some research about it, and it is normal on 4Runners too, is either called the Toyota lean or the Taco lean for Tacomas, because on these trucks, you have the battery and you have the gas tank on both on one side. So they're always leaning. Even when they're brand new, they lean like that. It's not necessarily a problem, but it does bother some people. So one of the cool things about this adjustable height suspension that we have is because we can actually dial that out. So again, the original idea here was to level out the truck, but I actually don't mind having a little bit of a rake still, because right now there's nothing in the back of the truck and we don't have the rooftop tent or anything on it. And so I think that once we weigh down the back a little bit, I think it will be perfectly level. So because of that, I'm totally fine with the 1/2-inch rake here in the front. But we still need to adjust the passenger side because we can get rid of that lean, right? So let's go ahead and get the passenger side up on a jack stand, get the wheel off, and then I'm gonna go over exactly how we're going to be adjusting that rake out. We want to lower this side by 1/4 inch to match the 22.5 on the other side. What you need to know is the motion ratio of the vehicle you're working with. For the 4Runner, for the 5th gen 4Runner, that motion ratio is 2:1. So we want to lower it by 1/4 inch. So we want, at the coil, we want to lower 1/8 inch. Before we do that, we want to make sure our threads here are nice and clean. I'm going to go ahead and lubricate them right now with some WD-40 to make sure this is even easier. Again, you want to make sure the wheel is off, but because these shock bodies are steel, you can do this while everything is still assembled, unlike other shocks, like I said earlier as well. So I measured and marked 1/8 inch down and started rotating the collar counterclockwise to lower the height. Pro tip, use a jack handle as a cheater bar to make this easier. I did a quick drive around the block and confirmed our ride height is now perfectly even. Let's have some final lift numbers that I actually just went and got as I'm editing this video. The final lift in the back is 1.5 inches and the front is 2 3/4 inches. That front number being more than 2.5 inches makes sense because my front suspension was sagging so much due to that bumper before we started this project. Next thing we're gonna do, we have to go get the 4Runner professionally aligned. We need to verify Eibach's claim that you can install this and get it, everything, your camber, your caster, your toe, everything aligned without aftermarket up control arms. So let's go do that. Hey, Toby and I are picking up the 4Runner. Toby's tired because we walked here. All right, well, I'm gonna get a close-up of all of these alignment specs for you in case you're interested, but the result is a resounding success. They said that obviously things were out of alignment. They said our toe is actually really close to correct, but everything else was wonky with the new suspension installed, so obviously it needed an alignment, but they said with the upper control arms, the stock upper control arms, and everything else, there was plenty of adjustment room and wiggle room to get everything exactly into factory spec. So I'll give this a thumbs up, a complete positive result with aligning everything. All right, final thoughts. I'm just gonna make it short, buy it. If you do my type of off-roading, I'd say buy it. There's nothing wrong with spending, you know, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 on a suspension if that's what you need. But if you're just a guy like me, a simple dad taking his family off-road, taking friends off-road, that kind of thing, and you're not doing anything too extreme, this is the best option that you can find. So guys, if you enjoyed this video, again, like I said at the beginning, please like, subscribe, and share. If you want to see more awesome videos with this 4Runner, my new Tacoma, or my friend's Chevy Colorado ZR2, head on over to the Overland DIY playlist where we do tons of other videos like this one where we do upgrades or we just go on adventures and have fun. So until next time, everyone, God bless, and don't forget to do it yourself.